Hi and welcome everybody to the Endo Fertility Podcast, where you will be empowered to learn how to thrive and conceive with endometriosis. If you want to understand more about your endo, how this can affect your fertility, and how you can personally take action to optimise your health and life, then this is the place for you. I'm your host, Dr. Lizzie Alexander, the Endo Fertility Specialist, and I'm a marine biologist turned integrative nutrition and health coach and holistic massage therapist. Most importantly, I know what it's like to have chronic fatigue, endo, and struggle with fertility. I am now a super busy yet thriving wife, business owner, and mother of a gorgeous little boy. Join me every Wednesday as I jump into topics that will support and guide your healing and fertility journey, from health and nutrition, lifestyle, emotional and spiritual support, and much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy listening. This episode is brought to you by my Endo Fertility Resource Library. Inside the library, you'll discover the free resource hub with 3 great downloadable products to get you started. An ebook called 5 Ways to Start Dropping Your Pain and Optimise Your Fertility. A short guide to sperm health, great for getting your man started on improving his own health. And an infographic with 88 things I did to get pregnant. Make sure to check out the show notes for the link. Welcome to episode 43. I hope for those that celebrate had a happy Easter weekend. Wasn't the weather just glorious here in the UK? I had a lovely time hosting my parents and siblings, enjoying walks and showing off the wonders of North Yorkshire, and lots of lovely food with interesting health twists. Mostly successful, but I did end up with the most disastrous carrot cake being thrown in the bin. It was gluten-free and sugar-free, and it was a recipe by Jamie Oliver, but it was literally like a brick. And it was terrible. I did serve it up and I didn't know it was going to be, I think it's because I curdled the eggs. It was awful, but tell you what, it did make us laugh. It really did. It had us in complete stitches. It was the last of our social occasions, funnily enough, at home as we start to pack up our house ready for our move to the Middle East later in the summer. So it's just been really nice. So today I'm going to share a great interview I had with an old friend of mine, Maya Krikke, who I've not seen in 15 years as she now lives in Australia. Like me, she has totally reinvented herself, and I really wanted to get her on the podcast for something a little different and really fun to listen to, and maybe even get your creative juices going. Now, just to give you a bit of background, Maya Krikke is the sole founder and artisan brewer of mixed Kefir, soon to be MYMY. Operating out of the Food Connect shed in Brisbane, Australia, she is one of 37 businesses seeking to change the food ecosystem, commercially crafting audacious yet extraordinary probiotic drinks since 2015. Her mission to make ethical and sustainable decisions for packaging, ingredient sourcing, and minimal food processing has yielded potent small batch artisan ferments of the most outrageous and exquisite flavours one can imagine, such as the Gin Lover's Compliment, the organic Rhubarb and rose-scented Geranium. So armed with a vision to better educate and communicate the science-based secrets of tibicos or water kefir cultures, she wants to enable access to any family home with a desire to learn more and create their own unique flavour. The MYMY probiotic pouch is like an equivalent to the Betty Crocker of home fermenting. Her debut Kids Probiotic Workshop last week demonstrated that even a 7-year-old can become a Brew Master in a day. So, if you're also alarmed by the rising childhood obesity rates and diabetes, poor gut health and an overabundance of processed sugary drinks, all contributing to a mountain of plastic trash, there is an alternative. Homemade water kefir is something that I actually found it amazing, and I found it really helpful in healing my gut, and is therefore directly relevant to helping with endometriosis symptoms and fertility, as gut and vaginal microbiome health all depend on a healthy balance of good microbes, which you can get some of these from water kefir. So we discussed how Maya got into making kefir and then selling it commercially, what kefir is and how it's made, what makes her product different from others on the market, how it can be beneficial to your health, and how you can make it at home, and so much more. Maya is a wealth of information, which is why it's a long episode, but I know that you're going to love it. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi wasn't particularly strong, so it's quite juttery for much of the interview, but please bear with it, it does get better. I won't keep you any longer, so let's get started. Maya, welcome. I am really excited to have you on the podcast. It's fantastic. You're my first guest of season 3. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm alive and safe and dry.
Yeah, we were just talking about the floods that you're having in Brisbane at the moment, which sound like they've been pretty epic. So I love to start these interviews with people to learn a little bit about their personal stories. You're a slightly different guest from usual. Normally, I have people who've had sort of like health issues with either with endometriosis or fertility, but I wanted to connect with you because you've got an unusual story, and what you've come to develop your probiotic. So you've developed these probiotic drinks, and I really wanted to share that with my audience because it's one of the things that when I'm working with my clients, we have to do a lot of work on their microbiome, on their gut health, and there's a big relationship between the microbiome, gut health, and endometriosis, which still needs a lot more research. And so I really wanted to bring you on the podcast and share your knowledge behind producing your amazing kefir. I'd love you to share how you got there. Was it because of your own personal health story? How is it that you got to producing your own sort of probiotic drinks line?
Well, I guess it would have been about 10 years ago. My sister living by the beach, and I was just looking after my son. And my sister came a handful of tibicos, which is traditionally what would happen is you get given these and you were told how to make them, and you would make them, and then every couple of months they would double, and then you would then do the same thing and spread the love. But my sister wasn't really making beer. So she said, I'm giving you this gift and it's a life-giving gift and blah, blah, blah. It's so beneficial for you and blah, blah, blah. And you just make this drink and it's going to change your life and it's going to keep you really healthy, blah, blah. And I just thought, not a hip. Why would I want to do that? And she said, no, just give it a whirl. And I thought, well, I guess I've got the time for the first time in my life, not working. So I said, how do I make it? She said, I don't know, just Google. So I then went on this arduous journey of Googling how to produce water and followed all the different ways, using all the different ingredients that all the various people on Google tell you. And I did not like the taste of it. And I just thought, why would anyone want to drink this? It's blah, it's gross, horrid. And I went back to it and I just said, you're an idiot. Like seriously, wasting my time here. And it's like the palate was just, I didn't like it at all. And she said, you don't have to make it that way. You can make it like your own recipe. You can flavor it with whatever you want. So why don't you try it that way? And I thought, okay. So it took 2.5 years of experimenting with every kind of sugar or sweetener, fruit juice, dried fruit, flowers, everything. For my son would actually drink. Before the both of us were actually happy to go, this is a nice drink, we'll drink. And obviously it's not the way that you want to go about starting because it's not cost effective. It's not it was all about the taste for me and for myself. Both have got quite fussy palates, I would like to say. I'm not going to say that my son is one of those children that would eat anything. He was olives and sauerkraut, even kimchi. He was eating oysters from a very, very young age. He would eat anything, raw fish. If I ate it, he would eat it, and I'd talk to him about how it would taste, and I would also explain to him before he ate anything that what the nutrients in that particular thing we were eating was actually going to do body, So I remember saying to him, oh, you should eat spinach because that will actually increase the iron in your body and actually improve carrots, spinach.
Yeah.
I said, but spinach with red meat, a little bit of red meat, a little bit of blue steak or raw steak, or like medium rare steak, your body's going to absorb 5 times as much iron. So you probably want to. It's not just about what you eat, but it's what eating, and also if you're drinking something, and it's order of which drink, eat, everything that is actually going to impact your health. And then it's going to make you either feel good or make you feel not so good. So he was just wonderful, like a little sponge. He absorbed it all. And then finally, I think it would have been 2.5 was when he was 2.5 that I made a batch of raspberry kefir, and I used whole raspberry. So I guess the ratio that I am using is about 1 kilo to a 20 liter batch.
Okay.
So, so it's quite a lot of fruit.
It's quite a lot of fruit to it, yeah.
Yeah, so I found that when I used juice to flavour it, the flavour was very one-sided, very superficial, and it was more reminiscent of what you would get when you have a raspberry flavoured drink, rather than actually drinking something that tasted like raspberry. And what I found with putting in the whole fruit, I just like the taste better. Fast forward that a year and a half later, I decided to go back to University of Queensland to study science. More so because I wanted to be able to understand how the mechanism for how things work. How can I explain this? Because I've got this really inquisitive, really intelligent, really chatty little kid who's going to ask me a whole bunch of questions, and I'm not going to be able to answer them, and I'm going to look dumb. I'm the only parent in his life. So wasn't about to start reading a lot. I'm not that big a reader. But what I like to read is not what interests him. So I went back and studied science, and it just so happened at the time I was making kefir, and would have been, I started back at university in 2014. I took my kefir to market in 2015 when I moved back to Brisbane. Commute the 3 to 7 hour commute from the coast to Brisbane on the public transport. Yeah, it was too much. And I moved back in with my mum for a bit, and my sister started doing the market. She was doing cakes and treats and cookies. So she said, "Why don't you sell your drink at the market?" And I was like, "I hate people. I don't want to deal with the markets. I worked in the service industry my whole life. Why would I do that?" And she said, "Just come on, it'll be fun. You can hang out with me, and we'll bring the kids." So I think I made 15 litres of kefir, 1.25 litre soft drink bottle, like all the different flavours. And I bought these beautiful, really expensive and impractical glass bottles because I'm really against plastic. So I bought these beautiful glass bottles, and then I had the fruit in the drink as well. So these people were seeing these beautiful bottles with the fruit in it and this little fizzy drink. And, I didn't want, I suppose I was a bit naive, I didn't want to have a brand on it. I just want it to be, this is, and I ended up calling it Kefir by Mick because Mick, Maya Krikke. And I sold out in 2 hours, made $320. And when you're living on a single parent pension, that's like kind of like week income. And I just thought, wow, and because I didn't really cost it out properly, because I kind of thought, well, this is what I would pay. Not thinking about that, but the thing that was really expensive was the glass bottle. So I actually put the price of the glass bottles on top of the cost of the drink, but I offered people a credit. So if they brought back their glass bottles, they would get the cost of the bottle, I think $2 a bottle back.
Back again. Oh, good idea.
And then a fortnight later, everyone brought back their bottles, and everyone came back and they brought all their friends. So that's kind of how it started. And I really didn't like doing the market so much because it was a 4 a.m. start. My son was 4 years old. And I just thought, just get these put into the shop and sell it, make it and sell it, right? So then I went on the arduous journey of Artisan, so Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, all the labelling requirements, all the things you need. took my kefir to a few places, and the place that my sister was using as a commercial kitchen, I took them and she said, "This is beautiful. We really want to stock this, but where do you make it?" And I said, "We can't stock anything unless it's made in the commercial kitchen. So then I went on the process of actually getting a food license, and I started using that commercial kitchen. And that was I started up there in October 2000, in the commercial kitchen there. And it's been a journey and an evolution. I think in 2017, I don't think I was charging enough for it, considering I'm probably everyone who makes a probiotic drink at home then decides to commercialize it. They go, right, we're going to make it in a bigger bottle and we're going to dilute it because that's what people want. So everyone sells it in a 330 ml or a 500 ml bottle. It's diluted, and then to avoid worrying about over fermentation, they carbonate, they force carbonate. And then that becomes this benchmark. But what you end up getting is a diluted product that isn't actually really that probiotic. And then they've got to factor in shelf life. How are we going to get it to be shelf stable in a refrigerated environment for X amount of time so that we have better salability? And I learned all of this while I did a couple of food science subjects of principle preservation. And I was just floored because the more I did on food preservation, I realized like taking something and making it commercial actually just takes whatever good there is in that food and spreading it out as thin as they possibly can to make a maximum profit margin. And then the end product isn't actually going to be that beneficial for the consumer. And I thought, no, stop that. I'm not doing that. I'm going to be different. Obviously, that's the story of my life. I don't know if it's worked for me yet. So I thought, I'm not going to go bigger. I'm going to keep it really small. I'm going to keep my product as concentrated as it possibly is. So I ended up, because we were doing a science experiment at uni at the time, we were measuring how quickly rod-shaped bacteria multiplied after it got above 25 degrees. So we had the bacteria, we then heated it up to raise the temperature, and then we had to build these spectrophotometers, which is effectively you shine a light, and obviously it was the red LED light, shine a light through, and then the opacity will tell you how much is, the more opaque it is, then the more bacteria there are, and then you calculate how quickly, every 20 minutes, rod-shaped bacteria are amazing. Every 20 minutes, a new generation. So you're then able to determine how quickly to multiply. And at the time, obviously I was making kefir, and I thought, take my because I made the spectrophotometer myself out of cardboard, right? And I was like, university won't miss one LED light. So I took my spectrophotometer and I bought all these probiotic drinks, kombuchas and other kefirs market, and I put it against mine, shone the light through, and mine was 100 to 1,000 times.
Oh wow!
More, and I just thought that's odd. And I never really followed up on that. But what I realized at the time when I first started, I was actually making the kefir, draining out the probiotic fruit, and then I was donating the probiotic fruit to any farmers who had animals, because they would then eat fruit and they would get the probiotic benefit. So I wasn't wasting anything. It was all about a circular economy. And then when I bottled it, I would put a fresh piece of fruit in, because then it looked really beautiful. But what that was actually doing, so the science that I learned behind it, I've learned so much science now in the last 7 or 8 years, is when bacteria are very similar to humans. So when you eat an apple, it's made up of fiber, which are long-chain sugars, and it's made up of juice, short-chain sugars. And we tend to really dislike the short-chain sugars. Most people do. But it's actually the breakdown of the long-chain sugars that feeds our microbiota. So, and obviously the mastication while we're eating that also expresses different genes in our brains and makes us do different things. So, I guess when the bacteria get the fruit, if there is actually long-chain sugars in it, bacteria kind of goes crazy, the same way it does in your gut. And it breaks down the long-chain sugars. But when you put a whole fruit, like you put a whole raspberry in water kefir, like raw water kefir, as opposed to the juice of the raspberry, the end result is going to be really, really different because the juice of raspberries is short chain sugars. The same with most water kefir makers and kombucha makers just use juice because you put the juice into a vat and then you ferment it. You put fruit in, you then have to sieve out the fruit floaties. It's much more labor intensive. But the end result is you end up getting a drink that literally tastes as good as the fruit in, whereas you don't get that when you juice. So this was one of the things that I've kind of learned on the way. And I stopped putting fruit in because it extended my shelf life, because what was happening with the fruit in the bottle is it was fermenting at a much faster rate, to the point that after 2 weeks, the kefir would turn milky or would become so opaque you wouldn't be able to see through it because it was forming protein. So when you have a probiotic drink and it starts to look like it's turning milky or becoming more opaque, it's actually because there's so much bacteria that it's actually forming proteins, what turns. And my kefir still does that after 1.5 months. And that last month that you drink it, it's got around about a 2-month shelf life. That last month, it is so probiotic that it has such an effect. You know, like if a little kid, so I'm going to get you a little bottle.
Oh, please. I'd love to. Here's one I made earlier, like in Blue Peter.
That's peach. So I only just bottled this about, I'd say 3 weeks ago. And see if I can get the light down. It just kind of looks clear, but not quite clear. And you can see there's some floaties in it.
Oh, yeah, you can see the floaty. Yeah.
Yeah, so I tried to keep this as close to nature as possible. So by using fruit rather than juice, it's less processed. How do I make this as close to nature as possible without much processing? I don't even carbonate. So when I bottle it, it's flat, and then I let the bubbles form in the bottle. So it means we have to hold stock for about 8 days before we let it go. So when we open it, you open and close the bottle, and that's burping it.
Yeah.
Because it's not carbonated, you never know. So that's not that crazy because it was only bottled quite recently. But if you have a look, you
can see
those bubbles are just going to keep bubbling like champagne now, because it's a completely natural. And if you look at the bubbles, they're actually really, really fine like champagne, because it's a completely natural ferment. Whereas when you buy most commercial probiotic drinks, they're all forced carbonated to prevent an over fermentation. So the bubbles are really big and they'll bubble up right at the start, but then they'll go flat, and the label will say consume 1 to 2 days after opening. Whereas with mine, you can drink half a bottle, put the lid back on and stick it back in your fridge for 3 weeks and come back to it. And when you open it up, it will be fizzier and drier than it was
before. Yeah. Okay, because I dabbled. I dabbled when I dabbled. I never really kind of got it. When I was living in Jordan, I was making water kefir. I had some explosions, that he would hit the stick because I wasn't necessarily burping them. So it's funny when you were talking, it was really educational for me then when you were saying that a lot of commercial ones are carbonated. I was thinking, why would you carbonate it? I remember mine exploding and having bubbles everywhere. There would be no reason to carbonate it. So it's really interesting to hear that actually when I say with my clients that actually it's better to make your own than it is to buy it, then you've absolutely, unless of course you've got the luxury of having someone like yourself close to you that you can buy. I wish I lived in Australia so I could come and buy your product.
Well, it's just, and it's true because you'll see people making kombucha the world over, because actually kombucha is really easy to make and hard to kill. Whereas don't see, like only recently you see a lot of water kefir makers now, but 7-8 years ago you didn't see much at all, because water kefir is actually really hard to keep alive and really easy to kill. Because most people were applying kombucha knowledge, I suppose, to water kefir, and I don't think there was a lot of information out about water kefir. And there are 2 or 3 different schools of thought about how water kefir should be brewed and made. But I tend to didn't throw caution. I just literally went, I'm going to make this my way. And, obviously it was called mixed kefir, but last year I was diagnosed with ADHD. So this packaging and label is actually really a good example of how my ADHD brain works, because most people will look at that and they'll be like, oh, it's too busy. There's too much information. I don't really know what that stands for. What does it mean? Whereas to me, I was like, well, it's a live probiotic brain. Love your gut. And it's mixed FFF peach kefir. FFF actually stands for finely fermented fruit. The real point of difference in my brewing technique I created myself. Being in Australia, I thought people would make all these little FFF jokes about it, but no, most people who don't have ADHD are like, they don't know, it's too hard, they don't want to know. No, so the new branding, which this is my new logo, but
MYMY.
So what happened is about 3 years ago, somebody trademarked Love Your Gut. And they trademarked it 4 years after I had been using this. But because I wasn't spending money with a trademark attorney, keeping my eyes peeled in Australia, when I went to trademark my brand, it came back and they said, you can't use Love Your Guts. It was trademarked last year. And I said, yeah, but I can prove I have internet, and they said, yeah, but do you want to spend what little money you have going to court about that? Or why don't you just come up with a new thing? So I ended up coming up with just MYMY. This is the sugar-free range. So it was made initially for diabetics who don't want sugar. And I experimented with xylitol. I would never use stevia because I don't like the taste.
No, it's horrible.
I used raw live honey, which I really, really liked, but then all the vegans jumped up in arms. So I ended up going for organic coconut nectar because it's the least processed. They literally climb up trees and squeeze the flower to ooze the nectar out. So it's not very heavily processed at all. And it's also full of a lot of nutrients and minerals, so it's quite rich. And it has zero calories, or it has less than 1 gram by the time it's fermented. But it's quite a different product to that, in that it's not sweet at all, but it's still naturally fizzy. And this one is the one I've been secretly drinking most of the stock of, is Davidson Plum. So Davidson plums are native to Australia. They have not really been taken up by white people because they're not really edible. They're really, really acidic, really bitter, really, really sour. But it makes great beer. So I have Davidson plum in the sugar-free, and I burped that. This one's been in the bottle now for about 1.5 months, and
you can see it's very cloudy.
It's quite cloudy.
Yeah.
And that, if I open that will just keep bubbling.
You can feel the bubbles. Yeah, for those listeners, you probably want to go and look at this on YouTube.
But and it's really sour and tart. But
sometimes, different people have got different palate tastes, and the sour tart can be really, really nice. I'm just thinking there's something that I put on my vegetables all the time. Umeboshi vinegar. You know umeboshi vinegar? I love it. And it's that tart, and and yet it's the most alkaline substance out there. It's amazing for like improving your alkalinity, trying to get rid of the acidity in you. But it's that tart taste. So I imagine is it quite similar to that?
It's funny because it's vinegar, so it is acidic.
It's tart anyway.
Sitting around about 4 on the pH, but it will make your body alkaline the same way when you have lemons and citric acid. It actually alkalizes your body.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the questions. How does it do that, right? Because for anything to be absorbed by us, we've got to eat it, and it's got to sit into our stomach first. And our stomach are about 4. So that 4 to 5.5, if not really that healthy. And so if you have anything too alkaline, then it's going to upset your stomach, because stomach then has to bring it down to the acidity that it needs to be in order to pass through. So there's the whole drink lots of alkaline water is actually, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's all, And for me, going back to, studying science and doing this, I really wanted to do this business. I needed to understand how
What
the
you were
mechanism
doing.
worked. The biggest takeaway, because I read all these labels on all these probiotic drinks and all these kombuchas, all the ones that are really, really popular here. And it's all just, there's so much hippie pseudoscience bullshit, which you just can't make certain claims. And a lot of them do. This will detox your body and alkalize your life, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you can't say that. So, which is why when I started with my label, I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I'm obviously too busy with the branding, but literally it just says, my mixed finely fermented kefir, fruit kefir, is a potent plant-based live probiotic drink that is fermented with whole cut fruit. It is sweetest immediately after bottling and subsequently becomes less sweet the longer it's in the bottle as live cultures continue to sugars. It was created to be a healthier alternative to soft drink with a probiotic boost for immune system and to help you love your gut. Please help us make a real impact in the world by returning your glass bottle clean from the future. It's just really, really simple. And then the ingredients, and then the nutrition panel, and a warning label, which obviously wasn't very clear. It just says, please keep me refrigerated and upright at all times. I am alive. This was not big enough for
some people. Public. Oh, really?
So, I'm gonna show you.
And she's off again. She'll be back to the listeners that aren't watching via YouTube. Oh,
this is the new branding. So this was before I could afford to get a professional label maker, I was printing them myself with all the information squeezed on this top. And this is the new branding. It's just really simple. This was bottled last week. It's MYMY. All it says is a naturally sparkling probiotic. That's it.
Very nice.
I've taken kefir out of it because everybody else who makes kefir in the commercial market, all their kefirs taste the same. And my kefir tastes nothing like that. So little kids will drink my kefir and go, oh, I like that because it tastes like soft drink. So it was made to con a little kid into thinking they're getting a soft drink. It literally tastes just like the fruit that you put into it.
That's amazing.
And this is much smarter packaging. I don't know if you can kind of see, but it says, I'm alive. This bottle must be kept upright as the lid allows CO2 to escape and will leak if you tip it over. Please refrigerate me at all times and burp me before opening. So a little bit clearer, needs to be upright so you don't spill it. And then it just says plant-based, low sugar, soy-free, dairy-free, gluten-free, nut-free, egg-free. And it just says, MYMY is a naturally sparkling probiotic drink best consumed prior to eating a high-fiber meal. This results in the production of short-chain fatty acids, which are the main source of nutrition for your gut. So just science, just facts.
Just science on the back.
It's brewed with a special recipe that only uses fruit to flavour each batch. It's a unique artisanal drink with bubbles like a fine champagne that form in the bottle. We operate a circular economy for the glass bottle to mitigate packaging waste. If you'd like to join our cause for zero waste, please return this bottle to the Food Connect shed, where by commercial kitchen. And really, really, really different. It doesn't say kefir anywhere. In fact, in the ingredients, it just says MYMY is made using filtered water, organic coconut nectar or sugar, tibicos cultures, 72 ionized sea minerals, organic lemons, organic vanilla beans, and love. So it's just really, really clean, really, really straightforward. It's not catering. I found with my kefir, the target market were mainly hippies, people who are into kombucha, not so your average person would just be like,
it. Yeah,
I'm not going to do that. Whereas what I found, there was a TEDx in Brisbane in 2018. So I was invited to let people sample my product. So I brought 3 different flavors of beer on tap, and everyone was able to just taste it, and they had to give me feedback. So they either had a smiley face, a flat, like a maybe, or a sad face, or a big thumbs down, or this is really awesome. And literally every single person was 100%. Every single person tasted without knowing what it was and just went, oh, what's that? That tastes great.
That's
So
amazing.
that for me, if it's always been about taste, and I guess I've never really tried to market it on taste because I've always been trying to market it as a health-giving thing. But people don't actually want to know that because ultimately most people are swayed by how stuff tastes.
Yeah.
They don't care about what it's packaged in. They don't care about how it's made. They don't care where it comes from. If it tastes good and it suits them, that's all they care about. And what I think most people now that buy my product, because it is the most expensive, it is the most expensive probiotic on the market in Brisbane, probably in the world. Like this little 200 ml bottle is $6.50.
Okay, which I don't know the conversion. Yeah.
So to pounds, that's about £2 something.
Okay.
Whereas your average probiotic drink on the market is probably £1.50 for a 330 ml drink.
Okay. Yeah.
But that is 2 days worth of probiotic. So when a little kid under the age of 5 drinks half of one of these bottles, they will poop within the hour.
Excellent.
Doesn't have that effect on adults, sadly. A lot of adults would be happy if it did, but if you have it before you eat a meal and the meal has a lot of fiber,
and it will make
you will probably find that your movement is a little bit smoother afterwards.
That's useful to know. So that kind of takes me on to, I think there was a couple of questions that I didn't answer. I'm going to ask them now, actually, go back on it. Could you just explain, because we've kind of gone through like how you've ended up, producing the kefir, kind of like how you've done it, but like, what is kefir? What are they? And
tibicos, which is a scientific name, there are several stories about how it came about. The main one is the bacteria was formed from nomadic riders who would carry water to collect from cactus in an animal skin pouch so that they'd have liquid. So you have tibicos grains that are from all the different deserts of the world. And it's lots of different strains of lactobacillus. Some have different strains depending on where they come from. And I think there's leuconostoc as well, which is a slime-producing bacteria, which is probably derived from the cactus. However, there's another school of thought that says actually water kefir grains are just milk kefir grains that have been put in sugar water instead of milk. And then you have a 50% die-off for a lot of the breakdown for lactose, and all the ones that can break down sucrose or glucose are the ones that survive. So it's effectively a whole bunch of lactobacillus and a bunch of other bacteria and some yeast, and they live in a polysaccharide film, and they will expand and grow if they're healthy. And the hard thing is not a lot of people know what it is that's going to keep them healthy. And what I've kind of discovered is, and I know this for a fact, if you make water kefir on a regular basis, every time your water kefir grains double, or they kind of have like a mad sex thing where they just go poof, suddenly have lots and lots of grains, what you'll find is the product that comes out of that liquid very yeasty, because it needs to have all of those yeast in order to grow that polysaccharide film. So the people that sell kefir grains, so their main business is just doubling the grain, they don't know how to make a water kefir that tastes nice to drink, because you wouldn't be able to drink that because it is quite yeasty, and anyone with any yeast problems,
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
Would then
have an issue. Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so most people that make water kefir, the struggle that's real is you are putting your things in sugar water effectively, and sugar water is a medium that is going to attract every single type of bacterium in your kitchen, and everyone's got a different kitchen that's covered with a whole bunch of different molds and a whole bunch of different microbes, and different things are going to be attracted to grow in that. And because it's so temperature sensitive, and you also want to know if your grains are at a right temperature, it really wants to be above 25 degrees. So obviously for you, if your kitchen isn't 25 degrees consistently, then it's going to be very hard to
grow it.
Make. Yeah, you're going to have a different kind of brew. And for me, I guess because I've been making it for 10 years now, I've just learned through experience and not being able to explain it all. And I guess in the last 3 years, I decided to start digging and doing my own research and go, well, what is the science behind this? How do I explain this? Because I don't want to say this is a health-giving drink and it's so good, but not actually be able to explain why it's bullshit. So I then went in and found there were actually a lot of scientific studies on kefir and gut and how it impacts. And the main thing is we all have different microbes in our gut. It forms normally by the time we're 12 or 13 years old. And all of our guts and all of our bodies have a different pH. And that pH will go up or down depending on our stress levels or, our calm levels. And your gut bacteria just imagine a street which has had the same bunch of people living there for 100 years. Anytime somebody new comes down the street, they're just like, "F off, go away," like that. That's pretty much what your gut bacteria is like. And the only thing that's going to really drastically shake that up is if you completely change your diet, or if you take a course of antibiotics. So antibiotics literally wipes out people's gut flora on so many levels. And since the end of World War II, the incidence of antibiotics has just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Australia, the main 75% of antibiotic use is actually used in animal fodder. So
and then it
they're
gets
given
passed
to
through.
livestock. So then the livestock excrete into the plant. The plants and the antibiotics are everywhere. So you have this epidemic of antibiotic resistance. You have this epidemic of obesity, and it possibly is because of antibiotics. The other thing is doctors were removing people's what's that little thing? Appendix.
Yeah,
your appendix
which is really useful.
Well, it's effectively your appendix is your storehouse of all the good gut bacteria that you've ever had in your life cultivated. So you can take a course of antibiotics and it'll wipe out your gut flora, but then your appendix will just slowly
back again.
Put some of those guys back in, and then it'll repopulate because they've done this with so many people. They've checked their guts and they made them change diets and they made them change country. But ultimately, it always goes back to what it was, unless something drastic like a total wipeout happens. So how then? I'm thinking, okay, well, if you can't really change the gut bacteria, what good is it? And with all probiotic drinks, or even taking probiotics, or even taking vitamins and minerals, actually, it's just passing through you over a 1 to 2 day period. That's all it's doing. So the benefit that you're going to get is in that 1 to 2 day period. If you happen to drink it and then eat the right fiber or have fiber, or let's say you don't really eat anything except McDonald's or KFC, there's still some fiber in that. And the thing is, if you have a lot of probiotic bacteria in your gut and you do eat some fiber, all that's going to do is the bacteria is going to then break down the fiber in your gut, which is the long chain sugars, and the byproduct of that are short chain fatty acids, which actually our body needs in order to make a lot of vital nutrients to make neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and it also thickens the lining of your gut. People kind of think, oh, the lining of my gut, but it's not actually like a membrane. It actually opens and closes depending on whether you have inflammation or, and like one of the bacteria in my kefir, which is the leuconostoc, the slime-producing bacteria, that's actually really, really good for your gut because it actually helps your gut and your cilia in your gut to have more slime, which then prevents all these bad things getting in. But when you make kefir and the temperature is not quite warm enough and the leuconostoc goes crazy because leuconostoc basically breeds at a slightly lower temperature to lactobacillus, you get this slimy, viscous drink, which nobody really wants to drink. Tastes good, but not really nice, like not a good texture, but actually really, really good food. So we're often caught between what's good for us normally doesn't taste good, And what
Yeah.
tastes really good normally isn't
Isn't
very good for us. And I've managed, I feel like with this, I've managed to be able to nail getting a product that tastes just like the fruit. It's got probably 4.8 grams of sugar per 100 mils, which is half of that of soft drink, or about 1/3 the sugar of a fruit juice. But that's when it's bottled.
yeah.
The sugar fruit obviously has none, but that becomes less and less
It
and less.
becomes less
So
and less.
2 months after bottling, you're looking at half that. So
And
it's quite
just to
change.
explain to the listeners is that that's because you're, like you've said already, and this is just me explaining my understanding of it, is that because it's a live product, those bacteria are continually feeding on the sugars, and that's why the sugars then reduce over time.
Yeah. So the more the bacteria breaks down the sugar, which is why it's so sweet when it's bottled and it's not as busy. And you get to it a month later and it's half as sweet, but it's way fizzier. You get to it close to that use by date. And the use by date is actually more of a best before date. Like, you're not going to get sick drinking it after that, but normally when most of that sugar has been eaten up and there's proteins forming in it, it's quite like a thick
Quite
lot
strong.
of, like, you'll drink it and it'll coat your teeth and your tongue, and and you'll feel it thick. So I guess when I first started, those probably 7 or 8 years ago, my next door neighbor Liz, she my first friend in Australia, she had some of my kefir, and that was when I used to put fruit in it, so it was getting really, really probiotic. Brisbane is really hot, so she might have left it out for a few hours, so it then started to ferment really crazily. She burped it a few times, put it in her fridge, and she forgot about it for 2 weeks. Then she came back to it and she goes, "Oh, I should drink this." And I said, "Oh, well, it's really great if you can use it as a mixer. You can have with gin, and it's because I use electrolytes in the trace elements and minerals. When you use it as a mixer, you tend to have less of a hangover because you're not getting as hydrated." So she drank a 500 bottle because obviously she was my friend, so I was giving it to her.
Oh no! So the effects. Oh.
And she rang me up really upset that day because she had drunk the whole bottle. So I would probably say a 500 ml bottle, given the time, the amount of fruit that I put into it, she probably had like 10 or 20 times the dose of live probiotics. And it's not something she had all the time. And she said she was getting cramping.
You got a
really bad
hexamer
gas,
reaction.
And she's one of the only people that's actually had a really bad reaction. And I said, that doesn't sound right. If that's happening to you, I think you've actually got bad bacteria in your gut. And the kefir is just,
Starts World War III.
Upset that balance. And she had her panics out when she fought. So she was always getting any flu bug, any gastro, she'd be the first person to get it. So she was just like, "I'm never drinking your drink again." And she then went to the doctor, and at the time she had endometriosis. She was trying to get pregnant. She had, I think, polycystic ovary syndrome.
Yeah.
PCOS.
Okay. Yeah.
And clearly her gut wasn't that healthy. And she did a stool test and got fully checked out by the doctor. And the doctor said, "Well, actually funny, because that weird drink that your friend made, it just really upset the balance. You actually have quite a lot of bad bacteria in your gut because you have a lot of inflammation in your body. And if you hadn't drunk it, you probably never would have known because you're so used to, like, you think what is normal is actually you living with a lot of this bad bacteria and inflammation." So she ended up having to have a course of really strong antibiotics, and then was given probiotic capsules to repopulate her gut. And she had also got her endometriosis flushed out. And I think she had been trying to have a kid for 4 or 5 years with her partner. He decided, "I can't bother waiting for you." So broke it off with her and broke her heart. She was 30 something by that point. So she decided, I'm just going to get myself a sperm donor and have a baby. But first I need to sort out this. And she got that flushed out, changed the diet, moved out of the house, moved on with her life, and now has a 2-year-old boy and drinks my Kefir on a regular basis, but so does he, you know. So I think I don't know so much about endometriosis. I've never had endometriosis, so I guess you don't really know, but I do know that most people with endometriosis also have very high inflammation markers.
Yeah. Well, it's so it's an inflammatory disease. So it is. And what I found with all my clients that I've worked with is your gut is a big part of that. And I'm not going to kind of go into but it is your gut bacteria.
90%, your 90% of your immune system is in your gut, and if your gut isn't healthy, and most people's guts tend to be quite inflamed, whether it's from stress or from lack of oxygen or from not getting enough fiber or eating too much processed food or drinking too much or smoking or actually living in contaminated or polluted places, and not doing things in the right order as well, or not eating things in the right order as well, and obviously as women we tend to put a whole bunch of chemical shit into our systems and onto our systems. We use all these shampoos and conditioners that are full of chemicals. We use all this makeup and paint stripper that then remove it every night. We use, like nail varnish to put on our, I suppose it's funny because I don't think I'm a hippie at all. But I do think that I'm a little bit of a naturalist. Like I don't really wear much. I probably wear makeup like 4 or 5 times a year because I sweat so much and I'm just lazy and and I don't dye my hair. Like I have everything, my regime, whatever I do put onto myself, I'm very conscious about
of what you put onto your body.
About the chemicals that are kind of coming in, because I do remember when I was living in England and even before that, I had a few autoimmune episodes where I've never been allergic to anything in my life, but then I would suddenly go for a run and start sneezing and sneeze and sneeze and sneeze and sneeze to the point that I would just completely block up. And then for 3 days, it was like I had a cold. But I obviously had an autoimmune reaction to something, and I found that obviously after having Zephyr as well, I really wanted to keep things as close to nature, but more importantly, know where my stuff comes from. So I guess that's a really big thing for me is where does the fruit that I use come from? Where is it grown? How is it grown? I use a lot of organic produce, but even organic produce doesn't mean that it's not exposed to pesticides. Like I have a lot of biodynamic farmers as well that don't use pesticides because they use other plants to help with that. It's also about, how the land is actually treated, how the water is actually treated, how the animals on the land is actually treated, because all of that is more of a holistic approach. And it's really funny because all the fruit that I donate to these 2 farmers, I buy the pork from their farms, and their pork is mind blowing. But pigs actually have the closest gut stomach out of any animal to humans, and if little piglets do not they need to have a very acidic diet or they will die when they're pigs, And we only discovered this literally 7 months ago when one of my farmers, they had a whole litter of piglets, and then there was a little bit of flooding, and then the water became very alkaline because it ended up coming up through the Artesian basin. So it was filtered, and 80% of the piglets died. And they all went crazy first, and then they died. And they were like, how do we do this? And I remember at the time going, I'm bottling next week. I should have 10 kilos of probiotic fruit. Let me give these to you. And they had another litter of piglets around the same time, and that whole litter survived. But they all ate my fruit and my probiotics. So my drinks are very acidic. They range between 1.9 to 2.9.
Wow.
They're really, really acidic.
They really are.
But I guess the main difference is it's lactic acid. So our bodies produce lactic acid, so it doesn't taste acidic and it just tastes nice. Whereas when you drink kombucha, it's not lactic acid. It is kombucha's bacteria is slightly different. It's acetobacter. So that converts sugar into ethanol, which is why if you make your own kombucha, it becomes really alcoholic, and then it goes really vinegary because it converts ethanol and then it converts it to acetic acid. Acetic acid sits around 3.5 4.
Which would you... Sorry, carry on.
That's my main quality control is pH, testing for pH.
Which would you say is better for you then, water kefir or kombucha?
So they're just both different. Water kefir, I would say, is more of a broad spectrum probiotic, but it will have absolutely no effect if you have it after you eat. You want to have it before you eat. So
okay, that's really useful.
You know, and you don't want to have it with the meal because it's going to mess up. This is the other thing. When people eat and drink, it's really important. Kind of like I worked in the wine industry for so long, matching your wines with your food. But at the same time, sometimes they don't mix. And then it tastes really good and it's all really lovely. And then you get home and you're like, you have indigestion or you get the runs or whatever. And nobody wants. Nobody needs that. You know, like my whole premise is about educating people so they can actually enjoy what they eat, enjoy what they drink, but then feel really good afterwards because that's what you want. And then they might poop and everybody's happy after they poop, right? So, you know, and it's interesting because I had a boyfriend about 5 years ago and he had IBS and he didn't know that my drinks were actually very potent probiotic. And I gave him a 750 ml, which is actually a week's worth of probiotic.
He didn't drink the whole lot, did he?
He drank it all in 2 minutes because it was a very hot day in Brisbane.
Oh my goodness me.
And it was lychee Kefir. So it was really, lychees have quite a lot of enzymes, really sweet, and it really fits in. He goes, this is great. And like you drink it and then you burp. And then he drank the whole bottle and I turned around and looked at him and I went, did you just drink that whole bottle? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you know, that was like a week's worth. And he was like, no, I'll be fine. And he said, and I didn't know this because I've never had IBS either. He would normally have to go to the toilet 30 times a day because of IBS, you know, and it was not a pleasant experience. So anything that he ate was a real issue. He said he drank that whole bottle of beer and he went home and he said he took the first solid dump he's taken in about 5 years. And I'm like, thanks for sharing. Like, why would you tell me that? I'm like a new girlfriend. But what I hadn't, when he clarified, and he goes, I don't think you understand, I haven't had a solid poo in 5 years. It's always diarrhea. And your drink has just, it meant he didn't poo for 4 hours. And then when he did eat, he pooed a normal poo. And he was like, I haven't done that in a long time.
Oh, wow.
I actually think he secretly only dated me for my
maybe did. So he could. Oh, brilliant. I was going to ask you, you know, have your clients, you know, from your business, the people who buy your kefir, as they come back to you and reported on, you know, the health benefits, but you've obviously mentioned that in quite a few things. So yeah, people are feeling the health benefits. And are they coming back and reporting that to you?
They are, and I do ask for people to give me feedback all the time to improve things. But I think I would say 50% of my customer base actually, they just like drinking it because they like the taste.
Yeah.
And they think it's healthy soft drink. The other 50% are all people who have really struggled with their health.
Okay.
And I've had one lady, and she buys 2 months worth of beer every 2 weeks. And she said she's struggled with her health her whole life, her whole adult life, and no doctor's been able to help her. They've never been able to tell her what's wrong. They just said, you know, bad genetics, got plucked out in the gene pool when she was born, and she's just allergic to everything or whatever. So she would actually take probiotic capsules. She would drink kombucha. She was eating fermented food. She was doing all of these things, and it was just stressing her out all the time. And she tried my kefir when I started taking it to Rico May last year, and she bought one of the little bottles and she said she drank it, and by the end of that day she felt so good, you know. So then she said, okay, I'm going to drink this more regularly. And she said over the course of 6 months she stopped buying everything, doesn't buy any vitamins, minerals, probiotic capsules. She just drinks my kefir. She drinks 2 months worth in 2 weeks I don't know if she shares that with a partner, or kids, maybe. But she just says she doesn't eat anything anymore because just by drinking it prior to eating. So I tend to say don't drink it before you eat breakfast. You're better off actually drinking it after you've had breakfast. You have breakfast at, say, anytime between 6 and 9. You want to drink it around 11 o'clock. So about an hour before lunch, because lunch is actually the main meal where we eat fiber. Because most of the fiber you eat breakfast is processed.
Yeah, unless you're eating a good meal, which I get my clients to try and do.
Whereas most people will eat plants, like raw plants, as in a salad, even if it's just a little 2 or 3 leaves of lettuce and a carrot stick and a couple of tomatoes, like that is basically raw plant.
Yeah.
They eat that for lunch. Not so much for dinner. Most people have cooked vegetables for dinner, but they eat that for lunch. And therefore, if you have the kefir around 11 o'clock, it's kind of like, oh, it's a bit hot. In Australia, it's very hot by 11 o'clock. It's a nice time to have a drink. So it's kind of like you go to a cafe, you'd have one, you sit and chat with your friend, and then you get your lunch, and there'd be some salad in that. Then you'd eat that. And about an hour after you eat it, you get a buzz. So it's not like a buzz like you've taken a drug or something, but you just a little bit more spring in your step, little bit. And all that is because your gut lining's thickened and your body's producing lots and lots of short-chain fatty acids. And then it's able to then serotonin, more dopamine. You just a little bit more upbeat, which means you tend to have less anxiety and you just tend to feel better. And it's funny because the first 3 years I sold kefir, people didn't notice any difference when they started drinking it. They really noticed the difference when they stopped. People don't tend to notice when we do start to feel good because it's really incremental.
Yeah.
But when you have that little buzz for a while, so I've had people, they'll buy a 6-pack, which is technically 12 days, but they'll drink that in 6. And then they'll be like, oh, I'm not going to buy any for another. I'll wait the 12 days and then get another 6-pack, $30 pack. And then the second 6 days, because it takes a couple of days to go through. So 3 or 4 days after they've stopped having it, they feel more sluggish. They feel heavier. They're a little bit more lethargic. They fatigue a little bit easier, and their bowel movements aren't as smooth, So then it's when they stop taking it that they really notice.
So for those most of the world that don't live in Brisbane, you've inspired me, particularly with moving to the Middle East. I'll be moving back to the Middle East this summer. So I'll be back to the warm, which would be nice. So it means that it'll actually be easier to make my own kefir. So if you want to make your own kefir at home and you can be bothered, not everyone can, it's not everyone wants to. But for those that do, have you got any tips that would help with home, making your own and flavours?
I guess the most important thing is the water that it's 95% or 98% water, right?
Yeah.
You have water. It might be 93% water. Maybe it starts off at 5% sugar, right? You've got your sugar solution. But what sugar you use is kind of quite important. So a lot of people will use Raptura sugar. They'll use coconut sugar. They'll use raw sugar. I kind of stuck to from a purely science base. I use white sugar, and the white sugar that I use in Australia is a sustainably sourced vegan sugar. A lot of people don't realize, but a lot of white sugar is actually vegan. They egg white the same way they do in wine.
Oh, really?
To kind of find it. So this is the thing. So that's why it's so important to know where your stuff comes from and how it's been processed. Because most people just get the packet and they think it's all right. And when you read the packet, it doesn't actually tell you how is this made? How did it go from that to this? And sunshine sugar basically converts sugar cane and then it makes raw sugar sustainably. So I've used different white sugars and they don't all have the same effect. So the reason I use white sugar is it's basically bringing it right down to its baseline of sucrose. So it's very easy for the bacteria to get to. Ferment.
Okay.
Yeah. And I always ferment. So in my primary ferment, because I use filter water, because there's chlorine in the water here, I then remineralize the water. And I do that by adding these trace elements and minerals which are also hydrolyzed. But that's very expensive. Whereas if you have a natural spring water, that's probably best. And if you don't have a filter, just buy a 10-litre of spring water from Aldi or something.
Yeah,
because
okay.
that has got minerals in it and it doesn't have chlorine.
Yeah.
And then you basically make your sugar syrup, and I always use some citrus. So I use about 5 kilos of lemon in every primary ferment that I do. I mean, I do a quarter ton ferment. My ferment
Yeah,
is
you're doing like.
So I use 5 kilos of lemons, but I've since learned that the lemon rind and the lemon pith, no go. Pith makes it bitter. The rind is covered in oils, which inhibit the fermentation. So you want to cut all of that off and just have the segment of lemon and just put that in. So what that does is it actually brings down the acidity at the start, but then it speeds up the reaction. And any citrus fruit tastes amazing. Yeah. So
like grapefruit or grapefruit, orange, anything like that.
I think I did like a ruby red grapefruit basil. I did a Natsumikan grapefruit and kaffir lime leaf. I do a lemon kaffir lime leaf and bitters. I do a sweet mandarin and rosemary flavor. I do a pink mellow. So I do a lot of citrus when it does come into season. I don't do kumquat because kumquats are all rind. But, and I do a lime and chili. Really, really good with herb. But,
that sounds amazing.
Me, I love experimenting with all of these things. And I'm about to launch, obviously when I rebrand next month, I'm about to launch the pouches, which is basically my primary ferment already done for people. And all they do is open it up, add fruit, seal it, and a day later it floats and it's ready. So it's kind of like the thing everyone kept going, show me how to make a kit. And then you give them all these grains and they kill it. Within a week, they kill it.
Yeah.
And it is kind of fiddly. So the primary ferment is the hardest part. Why nobody sticks with it. So I've put that out so that people can get a month supply, which is 3 liters, so 2 1.5 liter pouches. And I think it's in a 2.5 liter pouch, so there's room for it to float. And we literally try to ship it anywhere in Australia in 1 to 2 days, refrigerated.
Oh, that's good to know. So okay.
By the time it gets them, it's warmed up to room temperature, and all they'd have to do is open up the pouch, put in the fruit, seal it, and the next day the pouch floats and it goes in the fridge and it's good for 3 months.
Oh, amazing, because I do have Australian clients, so they will definitely be interested in that. Yeah.
And it's just been made so that anyone can do it. And most people don't really want to bake a cake at home. They just want to get a packet mix, throw in an egg and go, oh, I made this amazing cake. It tastes so good, right? And literally they want to make a nice fizzy drink that tastes really good. So they get to use whatever fruit that they want. But I guess all the secrets that I've learned in experimenting with every single thing I could get my hands on, I'm putting together in we're doing workshops with kids next month where
amazing.
Kids will be able to make a little 1/2 liter. They'll be able to flavor their own pouch, and they'll get a little booklet about different fruits to use, and they'll also get to choose whatever fruits that we have available that are in season. And then they'll get a spider, which will basically be one of these little bottles and either vanilla ice cream or a plant-based ice cream, depending on whether they have allergies. And they'll have a spider and they'll go away, hopefully, much wiser. And they'll also get, I think we're going to be putting in a little 500 ml glass bottle. So they'll be able to pour that
into that and then keep. Yeah. What do you mean by spider? What do you mean by spider? You don't mean a spider. You mean something to do with the kefir. In
Australia, I think you'd probably call it a float.
Oh, okay.
You have a Coke float, so it'd be like Coke with vanilla ice cream.
Okay.
So in Australia, we call them spiders.
Right, okay. I'm not sure I get that.
We don't call it soda, we call it soft drink. And a spider is basically a scoop of ice cream in soft drink. But
okay.
Effectively has been made to con little kids into thinking they're getting soft drink, but it has half sugar, and they have a scoop of ice cream in that. And I was making this coffee flavor, which we use like organic coffee beans and like I think it was choc macadamia. So like really more like a coffee liqueur that was slightly fizzy than a cold brew drink. We had that with vanilla ice cream, and it was like you could just imagine having it as an espresso martini. It was almost espresso martini like. And then the other thing that I'm going to be doing next month is doing probiotic cocktail workshops where people will come and they'll get a ticket, they'll get 3 probiotic cocktails, they'll learn a little bit about product, they'll get to flavor their own pouch and with whatever seasonal fruit there is, and they'll be offered an opportunity if they want it to subscribe, because then they can just get pouches shipped off to them every month, and they'll just get it in the post, and they'll basically add their fruit, and then they'll have a month's worth of product that they make themselves and flavor themselves.
Amazing. I think what you're doing is fantastic. Not just sort of educating adults, you're educating like children, but they're bringing, I don't know, in today's world, like you were talking about obesity, diabetes, you know, our addiction to sugar, and you're effectively bringing a drink to the market that people like the taste of, but it's got those health benefits. It's got less sugar. And then to mix it, say, with some alcohol or educate children and they like it is actually amazing. It's fantastic. So Maya, my hat off to you. I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with what you've done. So, and thank you so much for coming on here. Are there any resources? I mean, you've just mentioned what you are going to be doing in the coming months, and I will obviously put that on the podcast page so people can look that up. But are there any resources or things you want to share and highlight to people that, you know, they can refer to?
My website now is fairly rudimentary. It was, I think, my 3rd attempt at building a template website. It's just mixkefir.com. But that's very mouthy and very wordy and very hard to remember. Like Kefir. So the new website, which will hopefully be launched at the end of March, is ilovemymy.com. Really easy. And I'm building that out as well, but it will also have PDFs available for people to buy so they know all about flavouring. There'll be information. There's going to be videos. There's going to be podcasts. We're going to be, not podcasts that I'm going to do, but, and I'd love to have this as a link too, but different events that I've kind of spoken at. I'm going to be doing, so where my community kitchen is called the Food Connect Shed. It is the first crowd-funded, community-owned, stakeholder-owned property, and it has 26 different food users there, but it also houses the Food Connect, which has been giving, in Australia, everything's a duopoly, so there's Coles and Woolworths, the 2 big supermarket chains, and everybody else is left for dead. So the guy who set that up, he was a dairy farmer that went broke because the whole food system is pretty bad here. I mean, it probably is in England too, but farmers just screwed. So he set up Food Connect, where he got a whole bunch of local growers who are biodiverse and they care more about the land and the animals and how they do their product. And he basically said, we're going to have a community and people are going to get their product straight from the farm. So I think there's 2,000 or 3,000 of their customers. They put their orders in by Sunday, and then the farmers get fed the orders on the Sunday night, and then Monday, Tuesday, they bring all the produce from the farms, and then it goes out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So it's literally like the food miles traveled is less than 200 kilometers, and it doesn't get heavily processed, not kept in cold storage. And obviously I use a lot of their fruit, but just the education around that, and also about if the farmers get paid a fair and equitable price, they will therefore not need to farm in a way that's not so good for the end product. Like I said, spreading everything out thin for it. So a lot of the farmers is community supported agriculture, where they have a closed market. They just apply to that, and the farmers get paid 5 times what supermarkets get paid, but then they produce this really awesome product. And all the people that in the community basically get products that are grown within 100 kilometers of their stuff, and it's well done. And they're doing all these education events where all the different producers that are there will do a little workshop. So I'm going to be doing a little kid workshop. I'm going to be doing a cocktail workshop for them, and we did do a showcase event with 5 artisan makers last year, right in the thick of just before the Omicron wave. So I was talking about water kefir. There was a lady who does sauerkraut kimchi. There was a lady who does raw treats. There was a lady who makes miso, and there was Jeff who does fermented hot sauce. And then there was a Texan lady who did ice cream. And then obviously they got a lunch put on with all the different foods, and then they were able to purchase any of our stuff. So we'll be doing that. And I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 social enterprises. So I'm one of the ones in there. We reuse our glass bottles and we produce a non-diluted probiotic drink. But there are all these other little businesses there in the Food Connect sheds, like Oz Harvest are there. They get food waste and they repurpose those meals. So I think they've repurposed more than 20 million meals.
Oh,
There's
wow.
Ballistic Brew, which is a beer company, and they do all their lacto ferment. So I don't know if you're a beer drinker, lactobacillus kills beer. So they did not want lacto anywhere near their brewery. So they basically set up a separate brewing arm at the Food Connect shed where they brew all their weird little fruit beers, where they do like a peach goes or a raspberry sour, and they do all their lacto ferment at the Food Connect shed as well. And then it's just where I'm at is a wild little community.
Sounds amazing.
We all have to work together, and there are pros and cons, but the ideas, and I guess it's all about changing how we look at what we buy and what we consume, and changing the food system so that everyone along the chain gets a fair and equitable price. Because so far, like, it's got all these people who might earn a lot of money doing whatever they do, and they don't have any time, and it's all convenience. They all go to the supermarkets. They don't actually realize that what they're putting into their bodies, which is a lot of this mass marketed processed commercial crap, they don't understand why that is making them feel bad. Because it's just pasta. It's just pasta sauce. It's quite different from actually getting a kilo of tomatoes that was grown 50 meters away and actually cooking that up from scratch. It's like you go to somebody's house and the grandma cooks this amazing home cooked meal with produce all from the garden, and it's just this amazing meal because actually it's alive, the whole bunch of microbes from the garden, and it's cooked in a way that's designed to be had right there and then. And too many people don't actually understand what that's about because they just don't have it. It's not in Western culture to do that.
And that is
everything.
Plastic,
it's processed, it's convenient, it's stick it in the microwave, bing, it's ready, and as long as it tastes good. And why does it taste good? Because it's got this enhancer and this enhancer and this enhancer, and all of those things might come together in your gut when you're having a glass of wine, which also has sulfur dioxide and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then suddenly you don't feel so good a couple of days later, and it's because, well, you just put a fucking bomb into your gut, and your gut's just going, no, like it's just kind of crazy.
I know, and we could do a whole nother podcast on that and have this whole other and I'm completely on you, with you on that. And that is something that I educate my ladies on, and it is about bringing that real nutrition back into their diets, and fermented foods is a big part of that. And so thank you ever so much for coming on today. It's been absolutely fantastic interviewing you. I've got one last question, and I always ask it, is if the women listening to this episode today could take one thing away from you, what would that be? Just one thing.
Eat more fiber.
Brilliant.
That just that one little thing. And when I say fiber, I don't mean a powder of a teaspoon of powdered psyllium husk, but even a teaspoon of powdered psyllium husk would make a huge difference. Just got to know when to have it. If you have the powdered psyllium husk, it will impact your colon if you don't drink double the water. But when I say eat more fiber, eat a fruit, eat a plant, eat something where you know where it's grown, and really take the time to chew it. Because that process, like every single plant is covered in its own set of microbes. And some of them are beneficial and some of them are not beneficial. But the more diversity of fiber or plants that you have in your diet, the stronger your immunity. Because just upsetting the balance by throwing all these weird microbes in there all the time actually is what keeps your immune system alive. Whereas if you have the same thing all the time, your immune system and your gut lining will become weak and will become thin. And what they call leaky gut is actually just when you have that, don't have that thick, because you're just not getting enough fiber and you're not getting enough nutrients. You eat fiber and you will feel full longer, as opposed to eating so much and just still feeling hungry even though your gut's bloated. Like, you won't have that eating fiber, but just eat more fiber, start incremental. Because if you start with a whole bunch right from the start,
you're going to clog yourself up.
This is what men do. It says take half a teaspoon of psyllium husk every day, and after a certain time, take a teaspoon, and then they go, I'm just going to take a tablespoon because I'm a man. And what happens is they basically impact their colons because they don't get enough stuff.
Yeah. And they want that. Yeah, fiber. That's an excellent one. So thank you very much for that. And you've already said that your new website is ilovemymy.com. Is that right? Brilliant.
ilovemymy.com.
Brilliant. I've remembered it, you see, so it obviously works. And I will, and you haven't written that down, so that really is just what you told me. I will put that on the show notes. So that's brilliant. Thank you, Maya. It's been absolutely fantastic to chat to you again after 12 years. It's been a long time. And we will be in touch. So thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and have some useful tips and actions you can take away and put into practice. This podcast is to add to your knowledge so you can delve into the whys behind your endo and fertility struggles and move forward with thriving and conceiving. It is not meant to replace your current medical advice. If you loved listening, then make sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. It would be amazing if you could take a minute to leave a review, as it will help in reaching more women who might benefit. Even better, if you know someone who would love to listen to this episode, then please share. If you want to find out more about who I am and what I do, you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I also have a private Facebook group, Thrive and Conceive with Endometriosis, where I share all sorts of nutrition and health nuggets. My website, endofertilityspecialist.com, provides you with lots of information, including my endofertility one-to-one health coaching program. Lastly, don't forget to sign up to my Endofertility Inner Circle to receive weekly news. The links are all in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope to see you next week for another episode.